Welcome. I'm Pam Laricchia from livingjoyfully.ca, and today I'm here with my son, Michael.
Hi.
My little tiny intro. First is the apology that if you're watching this on video, you may find that we look at each other, and you end up seeing half our face. Sorry up front if that happens. But the one little thing I wanted to mention is he went to junior kindergarten for maybe half the year. So that was half days, 5 days a week. And then I found homeschooling. You guys know that story. And when I asked him if he wanted to stay home, he said yes. And that was that so far anyway for your attending school career. Anyway, I was hoping you could give a little bit of an introduction.
Absolutely. So I'm Michael. I am your youngest son. I'm about to be turning 23. And among many other things, I work primarily in the stunt industry of Toronto for film and live performance. I worked for 2 years, medieval times, as a knight doing sword fighting and jousting and all this fun stuff. And then I left to go work on films, and I did some really, really fun stuff. Yeah. Got to be a stormtrooper for Lucasfilms. I got shot off horses as samurais, and then I just last November I ended up stunt coordinating for Apple for one of their iPhone 11 commercials, and that was just absolutely freaking bonkers.
Yeah, I remember that. Awesome. So let's dive a little bit into the unschooling piece. Mm-hmm. When you were growing up, I just thought it'd be cool to share what some of your interests were and how you pursued them.
Well, throughout my childhood, my interests really changed a lot and grew into a whole lot of different stuff. I think up until I was probably until I was around 8, it seems wrong to just pick out anything in particular, because at that time it felt like everything was so interesting. You're just so enraptured by just experience itself. It's just being a kid's ridiculous. So I think it kind of makes more sense to talk about things that I enjoyed specifically back then, not things that I was 100% honed into, but just things that were fun. So things like playing Smash Brothers with Joe on the N64 back in the days, playing freeze tag and hide and seek on the playground with a bunch of just other kids, listening to music, especially the ones that Lissy would give to me. We would listen to that all the time, and I remember when I was really young, you used to read us books. Yeah. I remember all of us kids sprawled out on the big king size bed, and you would just read us Harry Potter and all these old kind of things. I remember actually talking to them now, every single one of us has really fond memories of that. Oh. Yeah. And so those are the core memories that I usually get drawn into when I think about my early childhood. And it's really cool looking back and seeing how every one of them kind of evolved into a different facet of kind of who I am.
Right.
Honestly, yeah. Going forward 2 decades, it makes too much sense.
Yeah, we'll get there. Okay, so you were talking about that age 8, 9, that kind of that age right there, because that is where your interest, that was about the age your interest in karate started, right? So I thought maybe you could talk a bit about how that interest evolved over the years, because it's been really interesting to me anyway, to see how that kind of grew and changed. Mm-hmm. So I thought maybe share that.
No, absolutely. It was that was my life for so many years, man. Probably between, like you said, when I was 9, when I started, and until I was 19, 10 straight years, I was just the thing, always going. Yeah. It's funny because thinking all the way back to it, I always remember being vaguely interested in it. Like
Yes.
ever since I was a little kid, little, I was like intrigued by the whole idea. And it wasn't until I made some friends at the old Unschooling, like Shine conferences with Ann Owen and all that stuff. It wasn't until then that I got really obsessed with it, because I made a nice group of friends there. Mainly it was Max and Eric, and they were both like always talking about martial arts, and they took classes. And after we were done playing tag, which was probably like 6 consecutive hours straight at that time, they'd start talking about this anime, which was already pretty old even back then, called Naruto. Which is really, it's a world famous thing because underneath all the cliche anime bits, you know, it's just a sad story about a little orphan boy who's just really inept at basically everything that he does. And yet he's still really, really determined to make something out of himself. And I'm just going through my notes here a little bit. And basically just through sheer force of will of his own, since that's the only thing he has, because he's a sad little orphan boy, after a lot of struggling, of course, he eventually achieves greatness. And it's, you know, it's an anime. I should probably mention it's based in a world full of ninjas with supernatural powers because, you know, it's an anime. What else would it be? Yeah. But that, of course, takes him down the path of becoming a ninja and learning how to fight, more importantly, learning how to defend others. And as a kid, that whole idea kind of rattled me, because I never felt like I was one of those kids that like were born with like some inherent kind of talent or gift or drive or call or something like that. And the idea that determination kind of outpaces a talent or a gift in the long haul rather than a short sprint was like really fundamental to like the person I kind of ended up being. And in a way that really embodies what martial arts was to me. Quite frankly, it's all about like sure, people get a little bit of aptitude towards it, and like some people are kind of more naturals than others, but at the end of the day, you're only as good as the amount of practice. And if you don't, it's really evident the people that actually care about it as a thing rather than people that just kind of show up, you know? And that interest expanded and divulged into so many other things, like sports, like parkour and gymnastics or breakdancing or all of that.
Trampoline.
And since martial arts consists of two things, like the martial part, which I think is kind of obvious, and the arts part, the arts part becomes really personal. And it goes into topics like attitudes and morals, and it often gets really philosophical, and was personally my introduction to the whole idea of Zen and spirituality and all this kind of stuff. It becomes a lot more than itself. You know, it's kind of a more than the sum of its parts kind of thing. Yeah, it
really is. And that's such a cool piece, right? Because like you said, you explored so much of the physical side, right? Through all the different sports that it kind of grew into. And it grew into like the stunt stuff too, right? When you did a workshop with somebody who was already working the stunts.
I think the main thing that really drove me into stunts was actually Aaron. There's Aaron. I've known this man since I was probably 11 or 12 is when I met him, but he went to the same dojo that I did. And he was just like the nicest guy, really, really strong, almost aggressive personality, but he was just really kind in everything that he did. And he was really into stunts. He was just getting into the stunt industry back then. And he had, funnily enough, just finished working in Medieval Times, because that was why I'd never seen him before that point of the dojo, because he moved to Toronto and was doing all the Medieval Times stuff. And it wasn't until he quit that he came back and I actually met him.
Oh, yeah. No, that's cool. But then the other aspect that you were talking about too, that the personal growth, the spiritual aspect and stuff. And I got to wonder, it depends on the dojo, what their focus is too. But yeah, you dove into that alongside it. And that was the other interesting piece you brought up was it depends on how focused the person is. Like, because at the dojo, there were kids whose parents insisted they go.
Absolutely.
Versus the ones who were choosing to go there. And over time, it became quite apparent. I mean, not in a bad way at all, but that the kids just, they did what they had to do, and that was that. And you could tell that the energy was coming from the parent and not from the kid's interest. Right?
No, absolutely. It's one of those things that it only has as much meaning as you apply to it, because, like, obviously from my standpoint, because it means a lot to me, like, I think martial arts, I think the word itself, like, it's built into the word. There's the martial and the arts. And I think the arts is fundamental to what the experience is.
Yeah.
And it's like going to a painting class. If you don't want to be a painter, it's like, hey, I can do it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I remember I'd have parents come up to me and, thinking that somehow I instilled in you that drive to, like, how do you get him to practice at home? And I'm like, I don't get him to practice. I can't stop him. The broken lights show the bone practice. So that was always a fun seed for me to plant. To just smile and happily say, oh, I don't make him practice. He, he wants to go out there. So for them to just, say, hey, that's something different. So I thought that was cool too. Well, and I think we kind of hit on some of the next question in that conversation, because diving into a passion like that, right? I think is a wonderful way to learn so much about ourselves. Like when it's a choice, something that we are interested in, and we dive into it. Absolutely. I think we learn so much about who we are as a person, our strengths, weaknesses, like all these little bits. So I was hoping you want to expand on that a little bit, like how you found that.
Absolutely. I would take that so far that honestly, I'd say it's one of the only ways to learn about yourself.
Yeah.
Being completely
there
honest
goes 5 years of me talking. Yes.
Because passion is perfect for self-discovery, because it's like a part of you that was never intentionally put there. It's like you can grow a passion, or no, you can't grow a passion in the same way that you would grow a kidney, but yet you never consciously made either. It wasn't a choice.
Yeah.
A passion is something that's really evoked inside of you through a combination of yourself interacting with the world.
Yeah. Wow.
So in that way, when you're exploring a passion, it's not just discovering the pieces of who you are, but also discovering, like, how you fit into that outside world.
Yeah. Because, like, so much, because we talk so much on the podcast about helping kids explore their interests, and that's for that purpose. Like, often, they may go to the dojo and they may go for a couple of months and find they don't like it and they want to quit. And there is that aspect of, parents not wanting their kid to give up on things early. There's the I don't want them to be a quitter. These are all completely understandable thoughts. But it's one thing we try to help the parents work through for their kids, because that's what they're doing. They're trying to explore the world to find the interest, the passion that is so interesting to them that they will put in all the work. They have that determination. They will, but you have to find the thing. It's not instilling that dedication in the child for a thing. It's no, keep exploring and find the thing.
No, absolutely.
I was going to say even now, and then there's some parents I remember those first few years thinking, hey, maybe Mikey's going to be a generalist, it may be a few things, but you'll find, and we'll talk about that a little bit, the thread that goes through them. So it may be something that they can explore through a few different interests, but it's that passion, whatever thread is, right?
Yes.
Okay, I got it. Your turn.
I was just going to say that brought up a really good point to me, because a lot of my friends are in college or just finishing up college or university and stuff. And I've talked to a few of them, and quite a few of them are changing majors because they've decided that they want to do other things. And I think it's really funny that we give the older kids that luxury. But if you're a little kid, then no, just gotta stick with it. Come on, Billy.
Well, and the fact that they are older kids now and don't quite know. There's never a wrong choice. For me, if you figure it out when you're 20, 25, 30, whatever the age is, keep going, keep exploring. I mean, I'm still doing that, right? But, having been given the space to figure that out, or to not go to college until you figure, there's just so many interesting aspects to it, isn't there?
Absolutely.
Coolio. Okay. All right, that was really fun. Now let's switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
And let's go to the health aspect. Because when you were 11, you developed type 1 diabetes. And I remember, for me too, when it comes to our kids' health, right? Especially something that, can be potentially life-threatening. It's super tempting for parents to want to control things, right? Even more, because you want to keep them safe. I remember working through that and thinking through that, and I did choose to continue with our unschooling approach to food. And I think, having already been there, I think that was helpful during the process as well.
Absolutely.
And to actively support all your choices. When they would say, hey, there's a pump, do you want to use it? And you're like, no, I don't. That was fine. And then, switching back and forth, and the way you want to support your care, that it is your care and I'm helping you.
Yes.
That was rather than controlling it and telling you the way I think you should do it. Right. Now, that did make for very interesting appointments at the doctor. We had a lot of fun, with the doctor, especially the pediatric one and all that kind of stuff. And I will say they were all super supportive, right? They were all very supportive, even though they just did not understand our answers. Sometimes.
Exactly.
Still, what do you mean you don't go to sleep until this time? What do you mean you're sleeping? All those pieces and the food pieces. Anyway, I just thought maybe you could speak to that a little bit, your experience from friends and from people that we saw at the clinic, and some parents we heard about, and the questions they would ask us. We ended up explaining our lifestyle a couple of times for half an hour, as they just kept asking us questions and asking us questions. They were very interested. Anyway, so what are your thoughts around those different kind of approaches, especially when it comes to health issues and that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. No, that takes me right back to those little armchairs, explaining to all these people, just constant back and forth. But yeah, when it comes to the appointments, I personally never felt that on the spot about it, and I think that's a really interesting distinction, because it's almost it's really words. That distinction is really important, especially I think for your audience, because all the doctors, the pediatricians, the whoever, they are looking at you, the parent, and judging you. And they're not looking at the little 11-year-old kid on the table sitting on the chair going like, hey, what are you doing? So it becomes, at that point, it almost, you feel very vulnerable because you feel like you have to defend your own choices. And that's honestly what I think is one of the biggest struggles with unschooling, is because it's a struggle and a gift at the same time, because people are always asking you questions nonstop because they just like, there's
what
just
the
something.
heck?
Yeah. But I think, I think it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, really, that I think that support system is a lot healthier than a controlling, grasping kind of do it my way kind of system. But it's complicated, especially when it comes to this scenario, because it's complicated for a lot of reasons, because that kind of controlling environment can lead to a lot of bad places. It can lead to resentment in the child. It can, and an unchecked resentment like that can turn into acts of rebellion. And when you're working with a condition like that, acts of rebellion can be extremely dangerous. Like I hear stories, especially like if you follow like the type 1 diabetes subreddit or whatever, there's stories of people just getting completely fed up with the disease and not treating it for months at a time. And that can have really, really bad consequences. And that really shows how important it is to think of even things like a physical ailment as very mentally based, because if you don't take care of yourself mentally, then you'll never be able to deal with such a complex kind of system.
Yeah. And that feeling of out of control.
Yeah.
Right. When you don't have control, like for me, that was a big thing, was that you felt like you were in control of your health. And like, from my perspective too, it was, I didn't want you to have to try and figure out how to do it yourself when I wasn't there. As in, if I controlled you and told you what all the right answers were, right, then I expected you to just kind of remember and live those later, like when you were out and about and you were working and all that kind of stuff. Then, and not to mention, I mean, sometimes I think people can think with type 1 diabetes that it's a math calculation. How much insulin, like how much am I eating? Here's how much insulin, take it, and we're off. But there, like you were talking, mental health, stress, like how your body's feeling in the moment. There are just so many aspects to taking care of it, right?
Oh,
to choosing what your dose is going to be at any given moment, when to take some. And that's just not something I can feel. Right? Because I'm not in your body and not feeling all those other pieces. If you feel a little tickle in your throat, you might be kind of getting sick. You know how your body and your blood sugar reacts to that and those kinds of hormones and all that kind of stuff. So it was important to me and valuable to me to give you that control, but to be there for conversations. Anytime, right?
Yes, that's something I wanted to talk about.
Oh, okay.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
100% right. And yeah, it really is like, I think it's interesting you brought up the whole kind of like, hey, this is like a mathematical thing, because it's true. Like you get formulas and you hone in on your correct ratios and all this stuff, but so much of it is feeling. And because like you're not going to know when to check your blood sugar to make those decisions if you don't feel it in the first place. And like, I really think the most important part is to have those open lines of communication with your child, especially a child with an ailment like that. And I think and everybody is different too. So the best thing I think someone could do is to actually like, hey, talk with your child, not in a way that's like a commandment kind of voice, but like, hey, talk about the details, like talk about the ratios and the understanding, especially if you have like a really small child. Like I was 11 when I was diagnosed, and I was relatively self-sufficient, but like if I was 5 at the time, you would have had to rein it in a tiny little bit, but still like coming from that place of care and concern rather than like, hey,
so much of it was because for years I would calculate the carbs for a meal, right? Because, what child, maybe some children are interested in that food aspect, right? But more you just want to eat your food.
Yeah.
Right. But you knew how your body was feeling. So, and we'd have the formulas. So I'd kind of calculate, what you got there on your plate, that's this, like, because I figured out this. So I would do a lot of it just out loud at that point.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really good too.
The other piece, for those first few months anyway, sometimes you didn't feel like checking your blood sugar or taking and you would say, "Oh, Mom, do it for me," and that's totally fine because it's not like forcing them to take over. No, you have to learn to do this yourself. Like, okay, this is a lifetime thing. But for anything, those are all good clues as well. And just help because it wasn't a choice to have the insulin, right? But there was choice so much in who gave it, where it was going, all that kind of stuff.
I think that plays like directly into how we're talking about how it's kind of it's just as much a mental thing because I honestly don't even remember that happening.
Yeah, I didn't say you did.
But like what that tells me, just from me having asked that question, being like, hey, can you do this for me? That tells me that I just must have been feeling like completely overwhelmed. I just wish that I didn't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not like a commandment, like, hey, you got to do this for me. It's like, it's more of a plead. It's like, I really don't want to do this. And I think that's really, really, really important to have those, like, that was kind of nonverbal and implied, but if your relationship with your child is capable of having those actual honest conversations like that, like that's incredibly valuable. Because one thing that doesn't get talked about too much is it doesn't matter how old you are at the time. Like even if you're 5 years old, like after you're diagnosed, it's really, really common to have that sense of, why me? There's no reason in particular to contract something like that. And it really doesn't matter if the kid is 5 years old and doesn't know how to articulate it. I can guarantee you that
they're still feeling it. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Thank you. So for us, that was the big piece for not wanting to control it. So I think that was really cool, the stuff that you shared. I hadn't thought of it at the mental aspect. In the back of my mind, yes, but I haven't, verbalized it. But so much of it is that piece, right? And then it's just as you wanted to take over more of it, it was just there for you to do. So eventually absolutely. I wasn't doing it.
And because you were vocal about it and you
knew what you were taking over.
Yeah, you were explaining things as you did it in front of me. Like it was never a shock.
Yeah. True. Okay. All right. Let's get back to the interests now. Okay. And we're going to jump ahead to kind of current state the last few years. So when you've been working and stuff, you still have or do have quite a few interests. So I picked out a few. So martial arts and parkour and music and computer programming, game programming, philosophy, spirituality. Now that I'm saying them, like I'm seeing all those threads. And I will ask you to add any that I missed. Like I grabbed the really top level ones, but there's lots. So I was thinking or hoping you could talk a little bit about like the threads that you see that connect them, because they have all, they all still bubble up for you, right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I'll start with some of the ones that you missed. I don't know. There's so many.
I know, exactly.
I think the biggest ones were probably science and poetry. like science in general. Like you kind of touched
space.
it.
I didn't even say space.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Space is a really, really big one.
It is.
And I think that it's like going straight from the lines. It's like you can almost just draw a little map. It's like, martial arts led to the arts part, which led to philosophy, which led to questioning and just being inquisitive. And that really leads straight into science, because it's like, hey, here's the actual concrete answers to things. It's like philosophy just exists to attempt to answer the questions which science can't. And like science is kind of great at answering things. So it's like there's a lot of cool stuff there. So it answers, unlike philosophy, science answers things very concretely and very, very like, very practically and really. And as a kid, like, kids love to ask questions. There are kids that do nothing but ask questions over and over again. And so it's that fundamental part of you that's like, hey, why is the sky blue? Hey, why do I grow taller? Why is the earth round? It's like, hey, there's an actual answer to this. I don't have to get esoteric or anything. I can just tell you. And I think for the parents out there, I think being like containing some humility to do that, because kids will answer or will ask a lot of questions. And it's really the only healthy thing to do. If you can't think of like the correct answer off the top of your head, be like, hey, we can figure that out.
Let's find out. Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
go find out. No, 100%. It's like, hey, we used to have to go onto the old like big computer monitors and like go through Bing or whatever. But it's like, you can just whip out your phone. You don't even have to type into Google. You can just go like, hey, Google, is that going to make my phone go off? Yes, it is. Yes.
But yeah, no, that's such an important piece too, because I think that's part of deschooling for parents, is that the accepting or understanding or embracing the fact that we don't need to have all the answers, right? Because that's something growing up that a lot of us kind of took in, was that, okay, we went to school, we learned the answers, and then as an adult, you need to have that kind of authority, right? That I have the answer, I can tell you these things. And to be like, hey, I don't know that, like that got us in trouble at school, when we were asked questions in school, you had to have the answer, right? So to be able to say, oh, I don't know that, let's go find that out, let's go figure that out, can be a challenging thing for people to get used to. So that is a really important point.
Oh goodness. Yeah. So I think that covers decently some of the science part. With poetry, I think it kind of goes back into, it goes way back actually, because I remember when I was a kid, like, I was really shy. I was really quiet. I didn't speak out very much. And that was, a lot of people would kind of look at that and be like, hey, that's just the quiet kid, whatever.
Yeah.
But having grown up, I really recognized that the reason for that was just because it wasn't because I wasn't having all these thoughts or all these feelings. It was just I had no idea how to articulate them. Or if I did, I couldn't find it in any speed which was acceptable for a kind of conversation.
Because they're such surface conversations, right? They just like want a quick answer and move on.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And poetry is just incredibly interesting because the choice of word is just absolutely everything. Like having the right words can imply so much meaning in such a little space. It's like you can have 3 words that are equivalent to like 2 paragraphs of someone that doesn't actually know what they're trying to say. So like reading poetry really helped me be able to articulate and to speak.
That's very cool. That's one of my favorite things about words. In that, like for me, when I'm writing the books, I live in the story because they all mean the same, but it's the feeling that you want to
Mm-hmm.
evoke
Mm-hmm.
to get across your point. It's not just about the word itself and the action. It's about the feeling that you're evoking, because reading is the whole experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
For me anyway. But yeah, I have so much fun just picking exactly the right word that I want.
No, that's it. Because you're right. The feeling is the feeling communicates intention, and intention is something that can be hard to communicate with just words alone. That's why, like, we do things like video chats, because like having vocal or sort of like physical expression can give you the expression, but in text, like, you have to find the right meaning, the right way, the right cadence, the right feeling.
Yeah, because I mean, it is a harder communication mode when it's text only. Like that's been a whole, social media came up from when you were young. There was no such thing as social media, but that has been something I think that people have been trying to learn, is that, I say the things, but you don't know my motivation. You don't know the context.
Absolutely. In common speech, that's why emoticons are so used, because they can use those to express intention. Yeah. And on Facebook now, they got rid of just the like button, and they have the whole react thing with all the 6 faces. So it's like, hey, this is what I mean. Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool.
So did you have any more on the threads? That was
right. I got carried away.
Poetry and words. Oh my goodness. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, spirituality. Yeah. Like that just ties right into martial arts. Yeah. Because like I said, the whole martial arts brought me so much. It brought me into basically into the whole culture there, because it is an entire culture, and that culture is very, very rich in, specifically I took karate, so it was very rich in Japanese culture, and so that took me into Zen and like Taoism and like Upanishad, very like Eastern kind of thought modes. Yeah. And on top of that, it's just like it communicates so much history as well, and it's like there's so much of everything and everything.
Hello, unschooling, right? I wrote it years ago, before karate. So, Joseph with video games and Lissy with Harry Potter. And then I can write the whole same thing, is that I think a lot of parents worry that when a child is singularly interested in one thing, that, they're closing off the rest of the world. But truly a passion, I think, the phrase I loved that I chose word-wise, is a window to the world, right? Because you get, no matter what it is, you can get to so many different things, right? History, like you talked about, geography, as you figure out where it is, just all that spirituality piece, like the physical piece, all the different physical places you took it. Like it's a huge map of places that one interest took you.
Speaking of getting to the whole physical side of things, like I love physics.
Yes,
science is really cool, because it's like, hey, all of these things that I do, why do we do it this way? Why do we turn our hips when we do a punch? Like, what does that have to do with anything? Like, it's all about combining motions and getting, concentrating a certain amount of energy. That's all it is taking energy and putting it in a certain part of your body and then moving it in a certain way. And then that gets really, really complicated when you go up into like acrobatics and doing flips and twists. You learn about, off-axis rotations and so much stuff.
Well, I mean, look at that. So all the physics of it, yes, you dive into that deep with your acrobatic stuff. And then there's like the health, as in the body stuff, injuries and the muscles and tendon, like all that kind of stuff you've been figuring out along the way. It's a window to the whole world.
Two or three of the people that I, train martial arts with, they're like going full into physiotherapy now, because that was just the thing that called out to them from that learning experience. They're like, hey, how can you repair the body, and what happens when something goes wrong with it? What does it mean when you have an injury or a pain? All that stuff. And and yeah, it's like, I think going back a little bit, when your child has like a big interest in like one specific thing, they're not going to have a big interest in one specific thing that is boring and worthless. Like, that is, it's just impossible. That is the opposite of what is interest. So it's like, before you judge the thing that your child is obsessed with, maybe, I don't know, watch it or read it or like learn about
it. Yeah, that's brilliant. If they're interested in it, it's not boring. It's got legs, right? Mm-hmm. And it may not be that one particular thing has legs forever. It's that because they're interested in it and they want to dive into it, when you look back, you see those threads of where it can go. Maybe it's a step to something else, but you don't know these things in the moment, and don't jump ahead on them and try to take it somewhere that you think is worthwhile.
Yes, that's right? A good point. That's a very good point.
Help them dive in as deep as they want and help bring all those pieces to them as they want to explore, and let them quit the things that they move past. They're like, yeah, no, that's not interesting to me anymore, because you are helping them hone in on how, like, ultimately how they want to engage in the world, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I love that. All right, are we ready to move on? Okay. At this point, what do you appreciate about living an unschooling lifestyle growing up?
Well, I really could like go on for a while mainly about the freedom that I had to fully delve into my interest. Like that's it. That's it. It's
that's
like, it's find that thing that calls you and just like follow it, snake around with it until you get to somewhere where you're like, dang, this is pretty cool. But no, like that's exactly what happened with all of us. Lissy dove into photography, Joe dove into like story and writing, and I'm here having too many things. But yeah, everything snowballs. Wherever you start from, everything snowballs. And I think what's really cool is how like I'm still discovering more reasons that I think it was the right choice for us. Because like right now at my age, like I'm about to turn 23. And I think, as I was saying before, a lot of my friends are like just finishing college or just about to finish college. And personally, I think it's really interesting hearing about their experiences and listening to them explain specifically like their levels of apprehension or fear about going into the real world. Big old scary real
I'm sorry,
world.
guys.
Yeah. It's like like the world of school, no matter how big or fancy of an education you get or go after, like to them, it still feels like child's play. Yeah. It's like, which is like, it's understandable, 100% understandable. It makes sense from their perspective. And for them, like some of the professions they're going into are actually like really difficult fields. And like, of course there's going to be challenges, but that's the point of it. That's the fun part of it. It's like, they just don't recognize that it's the same thing.
The whole challenge thing, right? And being afraid of challenges, I think, is something that we kind of take in because of school so much, because mistakes are penalized so much, that hard things take us longer to finish. Because with school, it's all about finishing the thing, finishing the paper, passing the course, Challenges aren't exciting things to conquer on our own timetable, right? And, for us, like mistakes are just more information. They're not something wrong that we have to fix, right? So it is interesting when you think about how they see challenges and how they're fearful of coming across challenges versus, like you said, like, that's the fun part. You don't know this yet. It may take them a while to figure it out.
It's like, no, that's the thing. It's the exact same thing, but for them, it's like they have to make that mental swap, which is like doing it for a number or a grade versus like the fact that once they, get their job and move on to their full-on profession, it's like you're doing the same thing. It's just like for the respect of your coworkers and your employer. It's like that whole system is it's built. Yeah, exactly. It's built into be the way that it is.
Yeah.
It is designed that way. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's like it's just like there's fear that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah.
It really doesn't have to be there.
Yeah. No, exactly. That's beautiful. That's right. It is interesting when, and then we go back and we talk systems and we should probably not go there, but, when you look at the systems as they are and how school becomes corporate kind of work, and you still have the boss judging you versus the teacher judging you and the performance reviews versus it. But you can still so an unschooled kid, young adult going into a job like that can succeed, can, really enjoy it, embrace it, because like what we were talking about there, instead of all those external rewards and the external judgment, when you're free to make a choice about what you want to pursue, when you realize, oh, this is something I want to do, this is a job I want to do, you can bring that intrinsic motivation to you. And when you don't feel so judged, like when your boss makes a comment, you're just learning more about what the job needs from you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right? It doesn't have to be that whole kind of negative place. Like you were saying, they need to learn. It's that mind flip to realize how much control you really do have in every single situation, how much choice you really have. Like you can quit that job, you have a choice in how you show up, what you can embrace your own internal motivations and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I got off on a tangent there because I didn't want people to, worry, unschooling kids, well, they can't fit into this adult world if they don't, train for it for 12 years in school or something like that, right?
And I want to chime in there for a second. I'm not going to say my experience is 100% relatable to absolutely everyone because, like I said, my first job that I went for was medieval times because I wanted to go perform and do the whole medieval times fun stuff. But I'd never had a job interview before, at all. And I went in there, I was trying to, little nervous, trying to keep calm, but it's I went in there and I don't know, I just kind of was myself and I brought the energy and the passion that I had to the table. And there were certain questions that, I were kind of off to me because I was this doesn't really have to do with the job. This has to do with other things.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I thought the interview was okay. I didn't think it was crazy good. I didn't think it was crazy bad. But it was the first interview I ever had. And then they called me up and they're like, yeah, come work. So it's so much of everything is your passion because for corporate jobs or honestly, I should just say any job that someone doesn't feel drawn to, they're not going to put in any extra effort than they have to. Meanwhile, if you're doing something that you care about, it's completely effortless to go that extra mile and to do what you consider to be the right thing and to critique the parts of the system that you see, which is actually counterproductive to the end goal. Meanwhile, someone that's grown up in systems and school that, we admit there are problems in those kinds of systems and you learn to deal with it. You're trained to just deal with it and kind of nod along and be like, okay, I'll jump through your hoops. I'll do whatever you need me to. And like, obviously there are points where you just kind of have to do that.
Yeah.
But there's so many times when you can
choice,
just be
right?
vocal. Yeah.
You can still choose to jump through the hoops because I want what I'm getting on the other side of the hoop. And I wanted to bring, like what you were talking about there, calls back to the dojo, right? To you practicing and doing it so often because it was something that you were interested and passionate about. And I know you won't, mention it, but I know at work you brought that energy and that enthusiasm and that practice, right? I think of work as practice, really. But anyway, I mean, you were very well liked and respected there.
They loved me there.
They did. You were welcome when you left. You're like, if you want to come back, like, no problem, we would love. Yeah. So, I mean, just to let people know.
Yeah. No, that's a whole other story. Because actually, at Medieval Times, like, there's a no rehire policy. You are not supposed to rehire someone after they quit because, like, I don't know, it's stupid political. But I specifically got that nudge. Like, hey, please come back.
All right. So our last question. As a grown unschooler, what piece of advice would you like to share with unschooling parents who are just starting out on this journey? So this is kind of new to them.
Good question. I would say, I'm going to take this back to like kind of being a bit of a shy kid. But I would say when you talk to your child, just pay attention to how they communicate. Pay attention to how they communicate because I like to think I'm pretty articulate now. But like I said, when I was small, I just could not find words or couldn't find them fast enough.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't mean that I wasn't feeling or thinking. I just couldn't communicate it. And as a consequence, like I got self-conscious about that because like, there's always those kids that can just yammer on and on and talk about something.
And they keep going.
And they just keep going. Like
they've got the space, right?
Yeah. And I don't know, I felt a little bit different for that. And words.
Well, I'll pop in for a second while you think words, because I mean, that was something that I noticed. And for me, because you were my third child, right? So the first two were more verbal, like, and a different way that they would process things. They would process things by talking them out with me. Whereas with you, what I learned is you would process things internally. You would figure things out for yourself. By the time you came to me and said, I want to try karate, I just looked for a dojo. I didn't ask you questions. I didn't like, do you really want to? What are you? I didn't have a conversation about it because by this point, I had figured out that you processed that way. And that once you asked me for something or to do something, you had a reason. This was the end result, not the beginning of it, right? So I would just hop to it.
No, absolutely. I think for my experience, like that honestly meant a lot to me because having to, as someone that, found finding words very difficult, like having to explain myself after I say what I wanted felt like an entirely extra hurdle that was there that I had to get through. And so talking to your child, it's like if they seem as if they are struggling to speak out about certain things, to express themselves, that's the main thing. If they're struggling to express themselves, give them their own level of significance. Because, if you treat the words they say with the exact same significance as another kid that, like you said, likes to process things verbally, then it's entirely different. And if you didn't take that and run with it, then I almost could guarantee you I would have just felt unheard. And
also what for me, what was important was also just seeing the things you chose to do. right? Just because you weren't communicating with words, you were communicating in so many other ways by the things you chose to do. And so I would take those as pieces of information and go with it rather than needing the actual word.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny. That makes me think back immediately to just a couple of months ago. When I was out in New York, I was visiting Lizzie, my sister. And we were in an Uber with a couple of her friends, and we were just like chit chatting, kind of talking like, hey, this is what I do, this is what, all that stuff. And I mentioned that I was a stuntman and that I did like a whole bunch of physical performance stuff. And she immediately went, oh, so that means you speak with your body. I was like, oh my God, that is hilarious, but that's so true. That's so true. That's why I love those means of physical expression, like tricking, parkour, or breakdancing. Like, I think parkour is an absolutely beautiful thing because like it communicates physically, you know, people's expression of adventure or like exploration, because it's just like, you know, here's your playground. It goes back to being on the playground and playing as little kids. It's like, this is your playground, you know, make your own little narrative in your head and just go at it. Yeah. Just like, you know, make your own little movie moment in your head. You can climb whatever. You can go sit at the top and watch the sunset, like whatever. Just have fun and express yourself. And,
yes, that's so true. And when I look back, like at even that pictures when you were a little kid, like 1, 2, you were always very physical. Right. And then I remember, and I think I might have shared this story, like just in your physicality and understanding that piece of you, that movement was important to you, like that it was in your blood, I think is how I would say it. Because I remember, I won't use names, but because I was taking you and a couple of friends down to the parkour gym, to the monkey vault. And we were waiting at one of their houses, and you and the one friend were on the porch waiting. And, you know, he was sitting there and you were bouncing up and down the stairs, like the whole time waiting. And it's like, it is just in your blood to express through your body. So it's like when you're talking about threads that weave, like that is part of who you are, and giving that the space. And not expecting you, or, you know, in more generally, more physical kids, expecting them to use words to explain themselves, right?
And you know, really I want to chime in there really quickly, because I think, like, I dove into martial arts and the physical expression first before, like, everything. That was, like, one of my first core interests. Yeah. And I think that, because as you said, it was in my blood, and that's like the first way to communicate. That's the first way to let out the words. That's the first way to let out the meaning. And after so many years of doing that, and like, you know, martial arts expanded into all these different things, you know, writing, poetry, philosophy, you know, once I almost kind of mastered that art of communicating physically, then it was like, oh man, maybe I can learn other things. Exactly. So it's like, hey, then I started diving right into reading so many books and reading poetry, because I learned, hey, I can express myself now. Why don't I try to express myself in a way that I never could before? Yeah. Exactly.
And you started exploring it that way. And now you do a lot of, like, you really enjoy reading, bringing in that kind of expression, you know, versus watching as well. Like, I mean, you still enjoy that, obviously, but and then into writing. But that's the whole thing. That's the other piece of unschooling that's so important, is that it's the child's timetable, the person's. I don't even do the child distinction much anymore, but it's the person's timeline, right? That's important and valuable and meaningful to the person, not somebody else's imposed timeline. Like, for me, there's no behind or ahead, because also with unschooling, it's lifelong learning. Like, there's nothing wrong. Like, I'm still learning new things. There's nothing wrong with learning new things at any age. So once you get rid of the curriculum and the like child school age kind of thing, like those are the years you're supposed to be learning. Yeah. then that's all gone. And it really, truly doesn't matter when you pick up things. It's either when you need it, it's when you're as a person are ready. Exactly, that's where I was going. Stumbling with the words.
No, absolutely. Like I would not be happy if I didn't keep learning things every day. Like if I was 90 and I wasn't learning something that day, I'd be like, oh man, this is kind of a wasted day.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's the fun piece, right? The just being curious. There's just always so many things to be curious about, isn't there?
Absolutely. That's the philosophy. It's just the cool thing about philosophy. Sorry, I'm going a little different tangent. It's because there's so much thought into coming up with questions. It's like not even just putting all the effort into coming up with an answer. Because like we all know, like even Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's like, hey, give me the ultimate question. I'll give you the ultimate answer, but you can't come up with it. So you're stuck. It's like, it's the question is just as, if not more important than the answer.
Yeah.
And I think you're asking a lot of good questions.
It's so fun. Well, sir, thank you so much for joining me. It was so much fun. Thank you. Before we go, how can people connect with you online?
So I have an Instagram called Mike Flops.
Yes.
Mike Flops, not Mikey Flops.
It's Mike Flops.
Mike Flops, yeah. No, absolutely. If anyone wants to talk, like absolutely hit me up, or of course hit you up, and I'm sure you'll connect you.
I'll connect you. Yeah, no problem. And yeah, I will put the links to his Instagram online. Thanks very much.
Yeah, so good.
So fun.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Have a good day, guys.